Thanks to Shopify for supporting Future Hindsight. Shopify is a platform designed for anyone to sell anywhere, giving entrepreneurs like myself the resources once reserved for big business. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/hopeful, all lowercase. And if you need a little more Future Hindsight in your life, sign up for the newsletter. It's easy and free, and it's a great way to support the show. Sign up at futurehindsight.com. Welcome to Future Hindsight, a podcast on a mission to spark civic action. I'm your host, Mila Atmos. I'm a global citizen based in New York City, and I'm deeply curious about the way our society works. So each week I bring you conversations to cut through the confusion around today's most important civic issues and share clear, actionable ways for us to build a brighter future together. After all, democracy is not a spectator sport. Tomorrow starts right now. Democracy in America is clearly in crisis, and I know that the only way out of this timeline is to work together. The problem is that many of us are not talking to each other, let alone working together. But how can we get on the same page? Calling in is a practice rooted in a human rights framework that can transform how we engage across our divides and potentially be the bridge that helps our democracy survive. To unpack calling in, we're joined by Loretta J. Ross. She's an activist, associate professor at Smith College, and public intellectual. She's had a long career in the human rights movement across multiple subfields, including deprogramming white supremacists and teaching the principles of feminism to convicted rapists. Her new book is Calling In: How to Start Making Change with Those You'd Rather Cancel. Welcome, Loretta. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on your show.
So, having been in the human rights space for over 5 decades, you have witnessed tremendous social change. While our democracy has evolved in many ways, persistent issues like racism and white supremacy continue to challenge our democratic institutions, especially with Trump's return to the presidency. And you actually teach a class right now called White Supremacy in the Age of Trump. So how do you situate ourselves in the current moment? How do you interpret the current state of American democracy?
Well, I think somebody more famous than me says that freedom requires eternal vigilance. And so there's never a time when people in our country should not pay attention to what we have to do and the price we have to pay for freedom, whether it's honoring our soldiers or taking our responsibilities seriously to vote or to participate in civic organizations. This is the price we pay for the privileges of being an American. And I'm very happy to pay that price because I'm very happy to enjoy the privileges. And so I also recognize that most people are just busy trying to live their lives, pay their bills, take care of their families, do their jobs. And so it's a privilege for me to be very much in tune with politics, to have an analysis and a perspective and the freedom to read widely and pay attention to the things that most people say, oh, that's too depressing. I can't be bothered with that. And so, again, I take my privileges very seriously. And that's why I am fascinated in trying to help people live better together and have joy and fun in doing that. Because most people are not dedicated to being cruel people. They just want to live and let live. And so I wrote this book to help people figure out how you can say what you mean and mean what you say, but not say it mean. That's always a choice.
Yes, it is always a choice. Talk to us about what calling in is. Help us understand what the practice involves. And I want to quote something that you wrote in your book that I think speaks to the promise of how it can serve us right now and in the coming years. Quote, "Calling in is radical imagination work that offers true revolutionary potential for changing our relationships with ourselves and the world, end quote. So in practical terms, what does this mean, and how does calling in function as a democratic practice?
I probably should start by defining its opposite, calling out. Because a lot of people know what calling out is. It's publicly shaming people for something you think they've done wrong for which you want to hold them accountable. Well, calling in is taking another tack. Instead of publicly shaming people, you're going to choose to use love, respect, and giving the people the benefit of the doubt. And so you still want to hold them accountable. You don't want to give a pass to the harm they may have caused. But instead of humiliating them, why not appreciate them? Why not give them the space to grow? Give them the chance to rethink something that they said awkwardly or whatever, and not preemptively judge them as if you're some all-know-it-all and they're not. Why are you treating them like that? Because if you want people to believe you, then they have to trust you. And you're not proving yourself trustworthy if you're condemning them for things that you don't agree with. Why don't you give them a chance to explain? And so calling in, though, always starts with calling yourself in first. Because if you blurt out the first thing that comes to your mind or that first email that you rush on your keyboard, you're going to regret it. Because those are usually born out of your trauma. You need to put yourself on pause, give yourself a chance to reconsider, and speak from your intelligence and your integrity. And by the way, it ain't that deep. If you've ever parented a child, you know you can't blurt out the first thing that comes to your mind when your child says or does something stupid. You put yourself on pause, you think carefully about not creating more harm, and then you give your intelligence a chance to speak. We do it all the time with children, with our bosses, with neighbors. We generally do self-regulate our mouths. It's just that we don't make it universal when someone has gotten on our nerves.
Right. Yeah, that's that's a good perspective. You're right. We do this all the time. This is not rocket science. So I have a question about purity tests, because not only do we sometimes lose our patience with people that we disagree with, in terms of politics, but we often do purity tests with people who are our allies. And I think this has been going on forever, or for some time at least. And instead of linking arms and fighting the opposition, we're often punching sideways. Is it too bold to say that we've all experienced a version of this? And so I wonder, from your point of view, what's an effective way to stop this behavior? And everybody, get under the tent and let's work together.
Well, what we have to recognize is that our toys have gotten faster and better, but our emotions are the same old emotions. I mean, the original definition of a call-out killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. So it's not that we haven't had purity tests before or that we haven't had judgments on people. But purity tests are the mistaken belief that if you don't perfectly align with my opinion, then you're doing something wrong and I'm right. And it is neither achievable nor desirable. Every human being has a different lived experience. And that means that they're going to think differently about nearly everything. I mean, we can't even all agree on gravity right now. So, obviously, everybody has their own opinion. And through calling in, you can use your immense curiosity to find out how they got to that opinion. What have they been through that makes them think what they think, and what have you been through that makes you think what you think? And that, to me, is the best way to invite people into conversations instead of fights. I don't see why we should punish somebody because they say homeless instead of unhoused. And usually the people that are imposing these purity tests, they've never been homeless themselves, so they're just virtue signaling how woke they are without actually acknowledging the lived experience of someone who actually has been homeless. A lot of time call-outs are about power, not justice. And that's what I try to offer people a chance to rethink, like Adam Grant says. Are you actually doing this because you want to help homeless people, or are you showing that you have power over someone to make them change their ways, to conform to the way you see the world, you think, those kinds of things? I talk about the 4 intelligences that are necessary to live a wise life. I think most of us are familiar with emotional intelligence, the ability to self-regulate, to analyze what your emotions are, and to understand where they come from. I think we mostly have heard of cultural intelligence, and that's the ability to recognize that the way you were socialized is not the center of the world. Other people came through other cultures, have other traditions, have other worldviews that are just as vital and important as yours. But the two that I think are under-discussed is relational intelligence. That's the ability to right-size your relationships, to right-size your expectations of people so that you deal with what is, not what you wish it could be. And the final one that most matters to me is integrity intelligence. Always making decisions that you can look in the eye without shame. So the same impulse that would make you give the cashier back the excess change she gave you, even though you could have gotten away with it, is the same impulse I want people to use to guide all of their interactions with people. Don't do it because you can get away with it. Do it because you think so highly of yourself that you wouldn't want to get away with it. For example, I get asked by a lot of young people, well, why can't I say the N word? Or why can't I say this? And I'm like, the question is, why would you want to? What's going on in your soul that thinks so little of your own integrity that you would go around casually even risking hurting somebody else? Unless you get off on hurting people, and if you do get off on hurting people, own it. Stop pretending that that's not what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. That's very well put. Well, speaking of these 4 intelligences, you frame your activism under the umbrella of human rights, which I thought was really broad and interesting. And you are, in fact, one of the founders of the National Center for Human Rights Education. So I'm curious about how you see the connection between human rights frameworks and democratic governance in the context of calling in. So in your mind, what's the relationship between human rights and democracy?
Well, the human rights framework is ancient. It springs from ancient sources like Confucius and the Talmud and the Bible and all of these things. But our modern definition of human rights started in the 1940s when the world community recognized that what the genocide that the Nazis had done against Jews and homosexuals, et cetera, while it was immoral, it was not illegal. Because countries have a distressing habit of legitimating immoral actions, the way we legitimated slavery. People do that. And so under the leadership of former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, she assembled all these great thinkers around the world, including a lot of women, and wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And in that process, they set codes, they set standards for how human beings should be treated no matter what country they were in, what their identity was. And I really like the fact that this is the best expression of what human beings deserve from each other that's ever been written by humanity. The problem is we've never actually practiced it. And so we've got this shining beacon out here, but we are taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But what's beautiful about it is that they laid out categories of human rights protections to which we are all entitled. Civil rights, political rights, economic, social, cultural rights, environmental rights, developmental rights, and sexual rights. And now we're talking about digital human rights and scientific human rights. So those are things that people deserve, and it's the obligation of the governments we live under and the economies we live under to deliver those things. And so Human rights is our goal. Calling in is our process to get to that goal. Democracy should be the context in which human rights are protected and achieved to establish the dialectic between those things. And I think democracy is an imperfect system, as we can all acknowledge. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so fragile right now. But it's the best we've come up with so far. Mm-hmm. And I think we can keep striving for perfecting whatever political and economic system we want to have. But whatever the system is, its final product has to be to deliver the protection of human rights. I don't care what you call it. Just make sure it does that thing.
Yeah, well, thank you for outlining it in this way. It's very helpful. Let's get into the practice of calling in. You said earlier that it starts with yourself. And I was really struck by your story about working with Floyd Cochran, a former member of the Aryan Nations, who literally cold called you at the office, meaning he cold called the office and you happened to be the person who picked up the phone. And just for the record, you were at the time working at the Center of Democratic Renewal, which was previously named the National Anti-Klan Network. And naturally, over time, in the beginning especially, you had many misgivings about working with Floyd Cochran. But you practiced, I would say, radical democratic inclusion when you did it anyway. So how did you overcome your resistance to engage with someone whose values so deeply contradicted your own?
Well, I didn't do it by myself. I was fortunate enough to have some brilliant mentors at the Center for Democratic Renewal. One recently passed, Leonard Zeskin, who died April 15th, 2025. He was the foremost anti-fascist researcher in America. He's legendary. And so he was my research director at the time. And he used to always say, Loretta, fighting Nazis should be fun. It's being a Nazi that sucks. And so he helped me keep joy and perspective. And then my other boss, Reverend C.T. Vivian, used to always say, if you ask people to give up hate, then you need to be there for them when they do. And so this combination of two wise men in my ear made me re-examine how much I was motivated by rage and hate and really look at what are my motives for doing this work. Am I angry at people or am I outraged at injustice? And separating those two things. So when Floyd called the office saying, I want to speak to Leonard Zeskin, I said, who is it? He said, Floyd Cochran. And before I could even catch myself, I said, the Floyd Cochran? I recognized his name, his significance, and everything. I mean, there are thousands of Nazis out here, but few of them are the national spokesperson for the Aryan Nations.
Right.
And so he said, yes. And so I took a message and he connected with Leonard. And Lenny very painstakingly learned about Floyd's history. He'd been a very alienated young white kid in upstate New York, beaten by his parents, bullied by his classmates. And it turned out that when he discovered some writings about Hitler and put on a swastika, instead of him being afraid, everyone was afraid of him. And it's so relevant to today because we've got a lot of alienated young white boys who do not feel significant, who do feel that the world is against them. They've got a strongly developed real or imagined victim complex. And they're committing tremendous damage in their alienation. As a matter of fact, because they are isolated and alienated, that's what makes them vulnerable to being recruited into hate movements like what happened with Floyd. But when I first met Floyd, I was trying to figure out why should I care? I mean, if somebody in the Klan or the Nazis hates black people, I'm all right with hating them back. But slowly, in working with deprogramming people who have been sucked up into the hate movement, I found that I couldn't maintain that pose of indifference to their humanity. I found that they had stories that I hadn't heard about being bullied or being alienated or being too poor. I mean, I've talked to a number of white men who've never been on an airplane where Greyhound or Trailways bus systems are the way you traverse the country for the entirety of your life. I mean, these are the kinds of pain that America very successfully hides. So that when you say the word poor, you associate it with black people. When you say the word immigrant, you associate it with Mexicans. And you're denying a lot of the real suffering that's taking place in our society. And so deprogramming white supremacists exposed me to a lot of that hidden sub-story of what I can only call off-whiteness. They were white, but they weren't white enough to have obtained the so-called privileges of whiteness. And yet they were so easily seduced into blaming everybody else for their condition. They always thought that they were one lottery ticket away from being the next billionaire. Mm-hmm. And so they were so eager to blame black people, women, gays and lesbians, trans people, immigrants, never quite wanting to accept that you're on the wrong end of a bad deal. That if you united with the very people that you are fighting against, you can change this rigged game. But you can't change it as long as you participate in divide and conquer divisiveness. And so that's where calling in comes in. Calling in is always about not assuming that you know everything there is to know about any given subject, that you are capable of growth, and quite often that growth will come from the most unexpected sources. I find delight in talking to people that I'd rather cancel because I can always find out something interesting from them. Well, because I'm not immersed in Fox News, I don't know how people can get brainwashed by Fox News. And so whenever I talk to someone who only news source is Fox, I'm always surprised by what they've been spoon-fed, how that changes their thinking, how they can parrot these things. But I'm also amazed that when I go underneath their words and talk to their hearts and their real feelings about being decent people, I can help them align that inner good opinion of themselves with their outer behaviors. And so I really enjoy that work.
We'll be right back with Loretta, so stick around. You will really love this episode's Civic Spark. One small step we can all take to be more empowered and ignite collective change. But first, when I first started Future Hindsight, it seemed like I had to figure out all the facets of podcasting on my own. Whether that was finding guests, setting up the recording sessions, editing every episode. Let's face it, starting something from scratch can be pretty overwhelming. And in the early days of the podcast, every day introduced another problem that needed another answer. It's like your to-do list just grows every day with new tasks. And when you're starting something new, that list can pretty easily overrun your life. So how do you find the right tool that not only helps you out with that to-do list, but simplifies everything in the process? Because a tool like that can be such a game changer. Well, for millions of businesses out there, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. From household names like Cotopaxi and Allbirds to fresh brands that are just getting started. Open that door and get started now with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. And if you want to accelerate your content creation, don't fret, because Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. With all these great tools at your fingertips, you can get the word out as if you have a full marketing team behind you. In just a few minutes, you can easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. It's so refreshing to know that Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. So listen, if you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. And what I love about Shopify is that no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Turn your big business idea into cha-ching with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/hopeful. Go to shopify.com/hopeful. Shopify.com/hopeful. We also want to share about a podcast called What Could Go Right? If you're feeling overwhelmed by the news cycle, you're not alone, which is exactly why I want to recommend What Could Go Right? It's a podcast that looks beyond the headlines to uncover the progress happening in the world, even in difficult times. It's hosted by Progress Network founder Zachary Karabell and executive director Emma Varvalukas. And each week, they sit down with experts to discuss today's biggest challenges without ignoring the hard stuff. They bring nuance, insight, and a forward-looking perspective to help make sense of the current moment. They discuss everything from climate change to democracy to the economy. And this season, they're joined by voices like best-selling author John Green and acclaimed journalist Noah Smith, and many more. Plus, every Friday, they share the Progress Report, an episode that delivers key news and insights from around the world. Fight the urge to doom scroll. Tune in to What Could Go Right, wherever you get your podcasts. And now, let's return to my conversation with Loretta Ross. Well, thank you for sharing about many of the sources that have caused the hate, because I think that's one of the things that flummoxes so many people. Is it Fox News? Is it alienation? Is it all of the above? And, you know, in this moment where people are calling, especially on college campuses, to eradicate hate, I kind of feel like a lot of these students, or maybe even in the workplace, a lot of these employees, the hate is already baked in. You know, they come already fully cooked in some sense. And so what insights have you gained about the threats to democracy when hate becomes such a strong motivation or maybe even a way of life?
Before hate, there is fear. You can't have hate without fear. What we have to address is the fear first. Why are we socialized to fear other people? Why are we socialized to think that my way or the highway is a way to walk through the world? Why are we socialized to think that people with immense privilege know what they're doing? Because they often don't. You know? Why are we socialized to think that empathy is weakness when vulnerability is actually a strength? Ability to admit a mistake, own it, and make a corrective path to do better in the future, that is strength. It's only bullies that are afraid to admit they've made mistakes. It's only bullies and very weak people who got to project this image of strength that you can see through immediately because of how fragile their egos are. And so we have to break through this Orwellian doublespeak that we're dealing with right now and get people to understand that honor, integrity, vulnerability, compassion, these are not dirty words. These are aspirational words that we all should work towards living up to. And even though we're in a society that seems to say those things don't matter, they should matter to all of us. So that's why I love teaching people about calling in. I teach it online as well as in my classrooms, because people love learning that they don't have to walk around on eggshells, that they don't have to be perfect, that they can make mistakes with joy and learn from their old mistakes so that they can make new ones in the future. I mean, these are things that we can teach that are about adulting. One of the things I wrote in my book is becoming an adult is learning to tell fewer lies to yourself.
I saw that and I was like, oh, yeah, this is so strong. I don't think people say that out loud, though. I mean, I think this is the first time I've seen it in writing. I was so impressed.
Well, I kind of created it one day when I made that realization to myself because I was lying to myself about something.
Mm-hmm.
I think about whether I was going to get up and exercise. But anyway, that is not a mature response to what I'm doing right now. That is the way we want our children to grow. I'm a grandmother, and I just have every faith that our children are going to be much better than we are, do much greater things than we did. But we have to give them those tools of confidence, but introspection, adulting, not coddling. I tell my students in my classroom at Smith College, I can do two things. I can protect you from the truth, or I can teach you the truth. But I can't do both of those things at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Well said.
I choose to teach you the truth, but I'm never going to brutalize you with the truth. I'm going to make you experience the joy of learning, the joy of becoming more than you ever thought you could become. You will be so excited about your growth. But with that growth, you will not go home and turn over the Thanksgiving table for your Trump-supporting parents. I mean, let's do this better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk us through how we can have these conversations in our everyday relationships with family and friends that have really strained our society now, with our Trump-loving family. I think all of us have them in our family. Not all, but I think most of us do. I mean, I'm surprised that
70 million of us do. So.
Yes, exactly. So could you walk us through what a calling in conversation might sound like with a family member or friend who is consistently making harmful comments?
Well, let's start a little bit with the theory.
Okay.
Every human being is composed of both good stuff and bad stuff. Good characteristics and bad characteristics. Nobody's all good and nobody's all bad. At least very few of us are. And so in calling in, you always endeavor to focus on the good part of people. Not in some Pollyanna way, but even the most evil people are probably kind to their pets or nice to their family members or, want a fair football game, that kind of thing. And so with calling in, we really embrace the Adrienne Marie Brown's theory that what you pay attention to grows. And so I want to pay attention to the good every human being is capable of, and then giving them room to expand that good into more areas of their life, even politically. If someone who's against, let's say, public assistance to poor people, and they're adamant that that's what they believe, I'm going to ask, okay, can we agree that children shouldn't go hungry? Well, then what would be your plan for making sure that children don't go hungry if the parents are working every day and they still can't make enough money to make sure that Johnny has breakfast? Help me figure out how to agree on our shared goal and how to get there. And very few people are going to walk around and say, I'd rather they starve. Nobody says that, or at least nobody I want to know says that.
Some people do say that, but yes, most people don't.
Right. See, that's the other point I want to make in my book. There are people I do call out, the ones who would say that.
Right.
Calling out does have its uses.
Right.
And so for me, it's very important to focus on what people can do pretty effortlessly. Think about it. After a natural disaster, do you know how we as human beings rush to support? We don't stop and ask, well, how did they vote Republican or Democrat? Or are they gay or what? The only questions we ask our neighbors are, do you need help and can I help? So it's already in us. I just, again, want that compassion universalized for many more situations than we use it for. If we already know how to do it, why can't we let go of our prejudices and our meannesses that have been socialized into us and say, I'd rather walk the talk. I'd rather live out my religious or Christian values. I'd rather show up being the best Loretta I can be rather than the Loretta I'm ashamed of because I was mean to somebody just because I could get away with it. I mean, I don't want to be that kind of sticky, nasty person, and I
Well,
wouldn't
some
agree
people
with
take
that.
pride in that. I mean, I really mean that in
Yeah,
this
but
moment.
those are the ones that I'm calling out.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm assuming that's not the majority of
It
humanity.
isn't. I know you're right that it isn't the majority of the people. So we have these conversations face to face in our own communities with our own family and friends. And I wonder how we can scale it, because it's difficult to create a whole culture of calling in as opposed to this hot moment of cancel culture that we're in right now. And to, make everybody buy into this idea. How do you think about making it a whole culture that takes off?
Well, I don't think about it. I actually do it. I mean, I self-finance online classes for people to learn about it. I get about 200 to 300 students every time we offer our class, and the classes only cost $5.
Oh,
I
wow.
call myself the Walmart of consciousness raising.
I love it.
So I create a very low entry level for people to learn about and practice.
Where can they find this class? Tell us the website.
Well, the website is my name, lorettajross.com.
Fantastic. For
Yeah,
$5, everybody
for
should take this
$5.
class.
Right. If you can afford a cup of coffee, you can learn calling in techniques. So let me give you an example because you asked about how do you do it.
Yeah.
In one of my online classes, I had a blind participant. And she said, Loretta, I understand what you're talking about calling in, but when you're blind, whenever you have to go through a door or step up a step, some arm comes out of nowhere and places itself on your body. And because you're blind, you can't see it coming. And I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault, people who took advantage of me because I was blind. So I go ballistic on them. I just can't help it. It's my instinctive response. How does calling in fit into that, Loretta?
Yeah.
And I asked her, I said, why don't you rethink what is happening? Because you're not experiencing an assault. You're experiencing an example of kindness done badly. So when you reframe it that way, there's 1, 2, 3 things you can do. Number one, you can thank them because we want more kindness in the world. We don't want people cursed out for trying to be nice. We want more kindness in the world, right?
Yes.
But number 2, set your boundary. Tell your truth. Just don't tell it meanly. I really appreciate you trying to help me, but I don't like strangers putting their hands on me, particularly because I can't see it coming. You set your boundary, but you've also appreciated the kindness. Then the third step is work with them to come up with a better way. But if you'd like to help a blind person in the future, do you mind if we talk about that?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. You turned a call-out blow-up into a calling in while holding your boundaries, helping grow what you want to grow, that kindness, but also collaborating on what could be done better between two human beings.
Thank you. So every week on Future Hindsight, I ask my guests to share a civic spark, one small step we can all take to be more empowered and ignite collective change. So what's a good way to turn the insights you've shared with us into action? I mean, I know you've just given us an example. Can you give us another one?
Okay. I have a tendency to be a call-out queen. That's the opening line of my book. I take such joy in cursing people out that I'm having to constantly call myself in. I'm no Mother Teresa. I'm like fiery Leo, full of power and outrage. So what I have learned, though, is that I always want to do things that achieve my goals. And I'm tired of sabotaging my own goals. With that first response, that trauma response I talked about, as opposed to the intelligence and the integrity response. So the first thing anybody listening can do is put yourself on pause and then do a self-assessment to see if you're in that mental headspace where you can call somebody in or call them out or cancel them or call on them to do better. And sometimes you just need to call it off because you're not in the right headspace for it. So always take that pause and then that self-assessment and then choose from that continuum I just named which strategy works best for you in that moment. Because you have no obligation to call people in. It should always be voluntary. If you're forced to do it, it's going to be done reluctantly and badly. And because your first responsibility has to be to healing the wounds of your trauma. But the other thing I tell people is you don't have to go around hurting people just to prove you've been hurt.
Yes.
That always is a choice, too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so those are the kinds of things that I advise people. Start with that self-assessment. And that self-assessment is kind of like an integrity audit. Are you showing up the way you'd like to show up? And if you're not, why not consider things? I find a lot of people unnecessarily carry grudges, for example, weighing them down. And I'm like...
I've been guilty of carrying grudges.
And I'm like, have you ever considered that grudge is not bringing you any joy?
Definitely it's not.
So why not let it go?
Yes.
I mean, we have choices in a lot of things that we think we don't have any control over.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Well, you have witnessed and facilitated remarkable transformations in people who once held hateful views. What have you learned about the human capacity for change that makes you hopeful?
I have found the most unexpected wisdom from the most unlikely sources all my life. As a rape survivor, I never thought I'd learn about victimized violators from men who were incarcerated for raping and murdering women like me. But they were victims before they became violators, and they taught me that. They also taught me that what I went through as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse didn't have to define who Loretta Ross would become. I didn't want those dirty fingerprints to be my legacy. And so I've learned so much from the most improbable people. Kind of like Floyd Cochran. I got to start in with him because Floyd says one of his epiphanies when he was on the compound of the Aryan Nations in Hayden Lake, Idaho, was that he was standing by the guard gate one day and this white guy walked up with this big beer belly and, he was half drunk or maybe fully drunk. And he says he lifted up his T-shirt and had a big swastika tattooed across his beer belly. And he said, I want to join the Nazis. I want to save the white race. And Floyd looked at him and said, if that's the future of the white race, we're doomed. I was not expecting that kind of humor.
Right.
From a former Nazi. That same kind of self-deprecating awareness. I just enjoy and love how constantly surprised I am about how complex human beings are. I just love it.
Well, that is hopeful that we are not one-dimensional and that there is always room for growth and letting go of hate. Thank you very much, Loretta, for joining me on the podcast. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Loretta J. Ross is an activist, professor, and author of Calling In, How to Start Making Change with Those You'd Rather Cancel. Remember, civic action doesn't have to be complicated. It's about small steps that spark progress, like sharing this episode with a friend. Let's recap this week's Civic Spark and fire up our collective power. I know that we've all found ourselves in heated conversations, so the first thing we need to do is pause. Do that integrity audit on ourselves, and after that self-assessment, you can respond. And that is your call-in. Next week on Future Hindsight, we're joined by Maria Foscarinis. She's the founder of the National Homelessness Law Center and the author of And Housing for All, The Fight to End Homelessness in America.
Homelessness has not always been with us. It's often described as intractable, but it really is a solvable problem. I go back to housing is not treated as a human right in this country. It's treated as a commodity. And there are enormous interests behind this that make it extremely difficult to really turn this issue around.
That's next week on Future Hindsight. Now, be sure to follow us on your podcast app. We're here every week with brand new episodes to help you stay engaged. And you don't want to miss a beat. Follow Future Hindsight now, so we'll be in your rotation every week. And if you're looking for an easy and free way to support Future Hindsight and all the work that we do as an independent pro-democracy podcast, sign up for our newsletter. Head to futurehindsight.com now. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, see clearly, act boldly, and spark the change you want to see. This episode was produced by Zack Travis and me.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,